You're listening to Errol Parker and Clancy Overall, editors of the Batuta Advocate, on Desert Rock FM. Well, welcome back to Baxter Bird Studios on the Batuta Advocate radio show. You're joined by myself, editor Clancy Overall, and editor-at-large Errol Parker. And today we have a special guest. Hasn't been out this way since he was flogging home loans out here in the 90s, but he's having a bit of a trip. He's got the caravan rigged up and he's come out bush. We're sitting here with the Golden Greek, Mark Bouris. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, guys. How you going?
Thank you for coming in, mate. What are you doing with yourself nowadays?
Well, I'm still the biggest shareholder in the Yellow Brick Road Group, and I've got another business called mentor.com.au, which is a business that talks to small businesses. I'm trying to put the small business community in touch with each other, trying to build a community.
Now, one thing we've always noticed about, particularly in what you became a household name with, was home loans. There was another bloke at Aussie that was on TV. Aussie John?
Yeah.
John Simons.
He's got a similar kind of story, just the son of, fruiterers. You guys were putting yourself on the front of your brand. Where did that come from, that attitude? Because you don't see that with a lot of financial institutions. You don't see the face. You were the face of Wizard. He was the face of Aussie. What do you think that was? Do you think it was like a spruiking kind of...
Yeah, it was, I guess.
element?
I mean, to be frank with you, I followed him. So I've known John for forever, and I knew John when he was an article clerk in a law firm back in a long time ago. By the way, just as a correction, John lived in Strathfield, and I lived in Punchbowl.
Yep.
Strathfield in those days was a rich area.
All right.
So John puts himself out as being a son of a poor guy. His father was in the clothing industry, and I recall he went to St. Pat's, and St. Pat's was a rich school. So let's just get this clear from the fucking beginning. John and I were great mates, but John always had a quid. Okay?
Yeah.
So now but in his credit, John is a marketing genius.
Yep.
I am not. I followed John. So Aussie was the first out of the ground. And John, but my background is I understand capital markets. I have a master's degree in capital markets, and I thought, well, I can do the same thing he's doing. I just need to promote myself, and then I use my partnership with the Packer family to do that.
Okay, and you knew the Packers, prior to setting up this thing, or that was something that kind of came all together?
Yeah, I did. I did know them well. I never knew Kerry. I knew James through another mate of mine, a guy called David Gingell. Yeah. Who people are going to think, Bouris has thrown all these names up here. But David Gingell was not the CEO of Channel 9 at the time. He was just a punter. He owned a thing called a surf shop business down in Bondi. So, and James is 30 or something. And he's still sort of just coming out of his nappy. So, I knew James. I knew him through David Gingell. And I got introduced to Consolidate Press Holdings at the time through that association.
Yeah, right. Can you tell us a little bit about the first time you met Kerry? Because, that would have been for a young man who's, like you said, come from Punchbowl. Was there a culture clash, or was he kind of very much on your level?
I don't know. I think I would never say he was on my level. I'm sort of trying to approach his level. I think the thing with Kerry is that he liked larrikins and, people like that. He wasn't really someone who would suffer like your academics, etc. So I didn't come across that way. I come across as a bloke having a crack. He knew I knew my topic. And the first time I met him was in a formal sense. I had to meet him once the deal was pretty much being finalised with James. And Kerry had to give it his blessing. And he's the sort of bloke just ask you questions all the time, and he somehow had this ability to get straight to the issue, the thing that scared the shit out of you all the time, the thing you're worried about all the time that hopefully no one's going to ask you. That's the very question he would ask you, and you couldn't escape. So he'd back you into a corner, effectively, and he would just pursue you and pursue you and pursue you until you're pretty much about to break down and cry. Yeah. And so my relationship with Kerry was, in the beginning, a little bit difficult because he challenged me, but I stood up to him. But over time, we became really good friends, and to the extent that he'd ring me when the Roosters were playing on a weekend, and he'd say, every second weekend playing at home, he'd say, "Son, you go to the footy, come and pick me up." I'd go and pick him up, and it was just me and him go to the footy together. Yeah. And we did that for a long time. I went with him on his boat. I did lots of things with him. And there was a process going around at the time. Are you a mate of James or a mate of Kerry? An MOK or an MOJ? And that was a thing run by the Fin Review for a long time. and I was considered to be an MOK, but to be frank with you, I was probably, like, in terms of friendship, closer to James.
Yep.
But Kerry and I were good mates. But he was a challenging bugger. Like, he was always the boss.
Master of body language? Is that one of those kind of guys?
Well, in terms of his referencing to you, to me, he always dominated. So he always had to be the dominant one. And you had to let him be the big dog, because he was the big dog. My God, he was the big dog. For me, it was the big deal just to even sit in his presence.
How does one get a meeting with Kerry Packer? You know, like your first cab off the rank, like this is your first engagement with him. You know, do you go through James and say, I've got an idea for a business, and he goes, oh, I think the old man needs to hear about this? Yeah, well, you don't.
Right. He comes to you.
He comes to you. So he decides that he wants to invest in a certain asset class or a segment. In my case, it was he wanted to invest in a mortgage segment. He was already talking to Aussie, and he was already talking to Rams. Although it's a bit hard to talk to that Ram, but he talked to both of them. And James came to me and said, listen, mate, because we were mates, and he said, we're looking at buying either one of those two. And he said, what should we be looking for, because you're in the industry? And I started telling him stuff. And over a period of time, he said, well, why am I fucking talking to you? Am I allowed to say that? Why am I talking to you about these guys? I might as well just invest in your business. Yep. And I said, yeah, okay, well, let's talk about how we do that. And then once the whole process was exhausted, in other words, and literally you are exhausted, you've got deal fatigue. He then said to me, now you've got to go see Kerry. The last moment, you've got to go see Kerry once the deal was ready to be delivered on a plate to Kerry. Yep. That's the only way you get to meet him, Errol.
Well, it's an interesting story because, you know, people talk about it. It's a big conversation they have in say, England right now with the Brexit and all these different conversations that are happening where you can see a stark difference in the political classes and aristocrats of England and, you know, the workers and the punters. And I guess America has that big problem. You can even see it in the Trump family and their friends, you know, as opposed to Australia, where you can literally Punchbowl boys high. First job was at the Victor lawnmower factory.
Correct. Behind my house.
A decade later, you're meeting with these kind of people. Do you think that's a uniquely Australian thing, that you can just be one of these fellas?
If you have a go, you'll get a go.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. I mean, put it this way: if you can somehow manufacture the thing that might be of interest to them, the barriers to entry into their world just don't exist like they do in other places around the world. Like in the UK, that would never happen. Yeah. You would have had to go on to Eton College or something like that. Yeah. The US, the same deal. Yeah. It's probably a bit easier, but US, the same deal. Europe, definitely the case, especially places like France, stuff like that. Australia, even places like Singapore, you can't get to do that. Yeah. Australia, the place is very democratic. Yeah. Democratisation of meetings it's one of the coolest things that exists in this country.
Yeah. You don't think the old money, new money thing really means shit here?
It might in Melbourne a bit more, but in Sydney definitely not.
Behind the hedges in Toorak, it's probably a bit of a...
I think so, yeah. And in political circles, a bit of experience I've had with politics, that is the case. Yeah. But the other thing, though, is seasoning. If you become seasoned in Australia, that actually eclipses a lot of these hedges that you're talking about in Toorak. So, like someone like me, I'm a seasoned person in this country now. That gets me over what you would ordinarily have to put up with if you're a young guy trying to push something forward in, say, Melbourne.
Join the Tattersalls Club.
Yeah, correct. You don't have to. Seasoning allows you to get past another. He's a crotchety old bastard. He's survived everything. Yeah. We might as well listen to what he's got to say.
How do you get started in the mortgage game? I mean, like, it's obviously an industry where you need a fair bit of capital to get going. How did you get going?
That's a misconception. There you go. Right. You need some capital, just working capital. Yeah. Because a lender is basically an intermediary. Banks are intermediaries. So a bank A takes depositors from everyone in this room, and they, you put all your money deposit on an IBD or some sort of deposit account, and then they gather all those deposits up because they've got to have more depositors than borrowers, and then they repackage the money. They're paying the cost of the depositors might be 1%, and they're going to lend it to Clancy here at 5%. So they're an intermediary. They just take money short and they lend it long. Yep. So when you're in the mortgage industry, you've got to find that function. So you've got to find who will give me the money that allows me then to repackage it and retail it. So I'm buying wholesale and I'm selling retail. So in my business, in Wizard and now Yellow Brick Road, we access markets. They give me wholesale money. I repackage it and I I put the margin on, and then as long as I'm selling it at the right price, I sell it to the punters. I sell it retail. So you don't need to have the money. It's not your money. You just need to be able to provide the working capital it takes to run the business whilst you're earn enough. After which you earn enough money to pay yourself back the working capital. That's the deal.
Yep.
And did you guys, with that wave of, as you said, there was Aussie, there was Wizard, there was Ram. Was there a feeling in the financial sector that you guys had kind of blown the lid off something here, that you'd kind of, you jumped out the back of a truck like Elvis?
Yeah, totally.
Yep.
Totally. We took 20% market share from the banks, and we pulled their pants down basically. But that was in the 90s and 2000s. Never to happen again though, because the GFC pretty much put the banks in a position that, and the banks also were never going to get caught unawares again. Put themselves in a position where they're pretty much unassailable today, because they're so powerful, which is the reason we had a Royal Commission, I guess. But also they're smarter. Back then, I think they all thought we would fail, and they probably thought to themselves, well, let's see how much market share they do take. Then let's decide what we're going to do about it. Then we can go and buy them, which is effectively what happened. Aussie's now owned by CBA. Rams are owned by Westpac. My old Wizard business got bought by Aussie, so it's now CBA. And my business, Yellow Brick Road, I'm the only one that's left who's not owned by a bank. So, and you can still take market share, but you won't get 20%. But by the way, you don't need 20%. You get 5% of our market today. It's massive. Yep. Our market today is massive. It's in the trillions.
Shit.
Do you think, with the Aussie market, do you just reckon you guys could have held on, in that capacity? If we had the same kind of boom back then, do you reckon you guys would have bumped up 20, 30, 40, 50%? Because there's been the last 5 years has been something like no one's ever seen before. That's
true. I think what you're asking me is, should I have hung in there?
No, had that come 20 years earlier, how do you reckon it would have turned out for you guys?
Oh, what we're going through now?
Yeah.
Well, don't forget, back then, the housing market, interest rates were used to be 15%.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Then one day when we got involved, they became 6%. And all of a sudden, house prices went from 100,000 to 300,000. So we just had a reversal of the algorithm. So if I'm paying 16% interest rate, and now I'm paying 6% interest rate, all that happened was my 6% then turned into a new price, which is 3 times the original price.
Yep.
It was just reversal, restructuring the pricing. So house prices actually went up by more during that period than they have in the last 5 years in Australia.
Yeah, right.
So we probably rode the biggest house price rise and the biggest global liquidity boom in the history of the world, which, by the way, led to the GFC. So nobody would want to see that type of boom again, because we now know what it brings with it.
Bit unsustainable, or
it is unsustainable, and and Kerry used to always just say to me, "Listen, son." I remember one day he said to me, "Son, how much money do we owe?" I said, it was a question I never want to answer, and I never hoped I ever get asked. And I said, Mr. Packer, we owe $19 billion. He went white. He said, what the fuck? $19 billion? You've got to be joking. I said, no, but we got $19 billion with assets. I said, so we borrowed $19 billion and we've lent $19 billion. And he said, so fucking what? And I said, well, the $19 billion we owe, I said, we've hedged all the risks. So all the money we borrowed from US, United Kingdom, US and Europe. And we borrowed in all the various currencies, sterling, euros and dollars, US. And our interest rates are all different, because different interest rates in every other country. And then we lend it to Australians in Australian dollars and at the Australian interest rate. And Kerry said, well, what happens if the US dollar goes to 5 times what it is now? And I said, don't worry, Mr. Packer. I said, well, we've hedged that. I've hedged all the currencies, I've hedged all the interest rates, I've hedged all the prepayment speeds, because that was my area of expertise. And I built a really solid hedge. And he said, who you hedged it with? I said, this bank, I won't say name the bank, but this global bank and this global bank. He said, well, what fucking happens if they go broke? He said, and I said, well, these are some of the biggest banks in the world. There's not much chance. He said, oh, bullshit. He said, we're selling. And I said, this is in 2004, which we sold. And I said, yeah, but you don't need to worry. Well, he was right.
Yeah.
2 of those banks, those 2 banks, gone.
4 years later.
Yeah.
Gone.
Was that 08 they went?
Yep.
Yeah, that was... Fuck.
He knew it.
If only he was around to see that. Well, so
he just passed away.
He could see the GFC coming. He could see that there was a crisis coming.
I
really.
think he's one of those blokes who just, as I said earlier, he always asked the question that nobody else was prepared to ask. I mean, you wouldn't ask the question logically because logically, I mean, as a person who built these structures, I know that in a logical sense that this particular bank A had a balance sheet of X and it could easily afford to hedge my currency exposure because it's really small relative to the total business. But Kerry would ask the question, what happens if they go broke? That's not a question a logical person would have asked, although it's very logical. You know, like he just had this ability and he put you on notice. And when we sold it, it made sense. We sold it to the world's largest company, which is General Electric. And General Electric's balance sheet, at the time, they had $500 billion worth of financial assets in the world. They were the world's biggest finance company, even though they're bigger than Citibank and everybody. Yeah. And they were the only sort of organisation who really could afford to buy this. And when I think about it, hindsight, Kerry's guidance was just genius.
Yeah, you're big on mentorship and mentors. Who else would you kind of look at, kind of backed you and guided you as a young man?
Well, when I worked in the law firm, there was a guy there called David Babsky, who was a senior partner of the law firm I worked at. And David was a really great lawyer, but probably a much better businessman. His ability to ask the question and always look to create a sort of an unusual solution was something that he taught me. So he actually dragged me out of another place and offered me a job at his office, in his firm. And it was a reasonably big firm, but they had really good and interesting clients, so really big names who, were getting into trouble or were doing something unusual. Or we got involved in the bond sale of the beer businesses. We got involved in that business, and we got involved in the sale of the purchase by bond from Kerry Packer of the Channel 9 business. We got involved in Speedos, the swimwear and all. We did some unbelievably interesting sort of deals, which required a fair bit of creativity. So I was there, someone there who was able to observe all this creative thinking, so he was a big sponsor of mine personally. Like he really looked after me. I lived 3 houses away from him. I used to go to his house every Sunday. I knew his family very well. He was really a big influence on me for about 8 years, from about 26 to in my early 30s. And they were massive formative years for me in my banking knowledge. So one of the areas of expertise of our firm was banking. Yep. And so I got a lot out of being with David in those years. And he didn't just influence me in terms of my banking knowledge, but he just influenced me just in everything I did, every way I looked at my life. I'm not to say I'm like that now, but at the time it was a big deal and introduced me to lots of people, gave me lots of credibility, and I was able to sit around and learn stuff from him.
It happens all too often. Just when you think you're getting ahead in life and getting on top of all your bills, a massive utility bill comes along and pisses on the rug. All that careful budgeting, all those packed lunches, the instant coffee you've had to drink, all for nothing.
Well, now there's a solution so that you can keep that rug piss-free. It's called Deferit. You upload your bill and they pay it for you. You pay it back in 4 equal fortnightly installments.
And just when you were thinking how much it was going to cost to keep that rug clean, here's the best part. It's interest-free, and there are no late fees. It's just $5 a month, and you only pay when you use the service. Get the first month free with the coupon code BILLS. That's BILLZ.
So Deferit. That's DEFERIT.com.au.
The Deferit app is also in the App Store and Google Play. Fucking amazing. Their mission is to help Aussies take control of their bills.
So if you're one of those punters out there that moves a lot of money around week to week, jump online and check out deferit.com.au. Now, on to the show. Now, you ended up on television in The Apprentice, obviously following the footsteps of another prominent entrepreneur, businessman from overseas. Did you ever, particularly during that Wentworth by-election, consider throwing your hand up and going down federal politics? Did you? I mean, Dave Sharma ended up getting the job.
We spoke to a couple of people from the Northern Beaches who did receive a phone call.
A robocall.
Robocall?
No, to run against Tony.
Oh, right.
In Warringah. Did the phone ring for you at any stage?
Actually, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I was encouraged by some people to think about Wentworth. It's prior to them, I think, talking to Dave Sharma. But to be frank with you, A, it's not the right time in my life to be doing something like that. B, I don't really see the current structure of the way you have to be a parliamentarian is that you have to go and sit down in the mothership for like 6 months a year. It's not my idea of living my life. I mean, if they could do it somehow remotely, I might be considering it.
Yeah.
And if I was going to represent anywhere, I don't think it'd be Wentworth. It'd be somewhere more like a little bit more working class.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did, and I did think about it for about half an hour.
Well,
You didn't realise you'd have to take a pay cut.
Well,
A massive pay cut.
you could have gone into Craig Laundy's old seat. He's
I could have, and that's in the last election.
out in Aussie John country.
Yeah, but it's sort of not where I want to be. But plus, I mean, the timing of it wouldn't have been right. I can't just walk up and say, "Hi, I'll go and stand at Craig's seat." He's a good bloke, Craig. But I actually like politics. I got a little bit of a taste of it during the last political period, and if I could somehow make changes, I'd love to do that.
So you were doing robocalls for Sharma in the end. So you basically put your hand up. How did that come about? Have you always been a lifelong robocaller for the Liberal Party?
Well, as long as robocalls have been around, which is about a year or two. But I did robocalls for the following reason, and I did 350,000, by the way. And I funded it myself. And I got in a bit of trouble from the Electoral Commission because there was an allegation by one Chris Bowen in the Sydney Morning Herald that Mark Bouris is the face of the Liberal Party. And I can't remember now what he said now. But all he does is try to promote their negative campaigns or something along those lines. Of course, we know where Bowen ended up. But I agreed to do something like this because I thought I don't like the idea of negative gearing going, and I don't like the idea of changing capital gains tax. Now, that's not because I have an objection against the theory behind getting rid of them. I think to some extent they are distortionate. They can distort a marketplace. But at the same time, I took the view that you don't go changing good quality, stimulating policy in a market that's in a downturn, which is the property market. So I thought, well, Mark, stop talking shit and do something about it. So I did something about it. And I went and retained somebody who knew how to do all this robocall stuff. And I recorded this on my mobile phone, walking into a meeting, sitting in a reception one day, and I sent it on to the dude and I said, mate, just go knock it out. And sure, it pissed a lot of people off, but 350,000 calls might have influenced somebody to vote somewhere somehow. So but I just did it because it was time to do something and stand up and about something I believe in. And I did not never say once in the ad, don't vote Labor, and I didn't say vote Liberal. I said, seriously consider who you vote for on Saturday when it comes to things like negative gearing and the change to capital gains tax.
Because as we learnt in the election, it isn't just rich people who tend to benefit from capital gains and from other things like that. Are these things going forward? They're not going to go, are they? Because
no, well, I doubt. I mean, look, the country's managed by two types of policy. One's monetary policy, which is the Reserve Bank does, and they're meeting. They meet on the first Tuesday of every month, so they're meeting now, and they decide whether they're going to reduce interest rates or put interest rates up, just in order to stimulate or slow down the economy. That's a pretty blunt instrument. The other one is fiscal policy, and fiscal policy is tax policy largely, or when the government reinvests money into infrastructure. But let's talk about tax policy. Negative gearing, capital gains tax is tax policy. Negative gearing and capital gains tax are one tool that are simply designed to stimulate the economy. If the economy needs to be stimulated in the construction sector, which is an important sector in this country, the construction sector, then that's the only thing I know to use to stimulate it.
Yeah.
If for some reason the property market's on fire and it's out of control and it's going fantastically up, then sure, get rid of negative gearing, get rid of it, or slow it down, or stop it for a while.
Do you reckon that was 5 years too late then, 10 years too late?
Probably, 100%. So, because I said something about this, objected to them changing the negative gearing policy and the capital gains policy like 2 years ago. And some journalist who interviewed me 10 years ago pulled out of the Financial Review an article where I was quoted saying that negative gearing and capital gains tax was distortionate. Yeah, but that was in the context of that time.
Yeah.
it's about timing. I mean, policy is stimulation. You don't keep stimulating once you've done the business, do you? Because it's fucking worthless at that point. So you need stimulation when you need stimulation, and you need to be slowed down when you need to be slowed down, and that's sort of the way I look at negative gearing.
So I guess you could draw parallels between the way you look at the economy and the way the Sydney Roosters are run. And there's a bit of stimulation going into that club each year, and they seem to have a lot of talent. How long have you been involved with those guys, and why are you considered a sellout in the western suburbs?
Probably. Well, I tell you how that happened, though, because and I actually played junior footy in various Canterbury Bankstown sides, and when I was at school out there. Then I moved, when I was 18, I moved to the eastern suburbs because I went to university in Kensington, and it was too far to travel from Punchbowl. So I moved to the suburbs, and I sort of dropped off the footy a little bit. I didn't really have that much to do. We didn't follow it that much. Coverage wasn't like it is today, and I wasn't going to go to Belmore Oval to watch the game. So, and over a period of time, then the Super League War started. And I was pretty upset with what Canterbury Bankstown did in the Super League War. They went on the News Limited side. I quite liked the traditional game. I didn't want any changes to it. So I got a bit pissed off with the Bulldogs at the time. This is in the late 90s, 96. And I was living in the suburbs, and I thought I'm going to go to watch a Roosters game because I wanted to watch some footy. And then I started watching more footy, and I got to meet Nick Politis, and then I was invited to join the board. So I've been on the board now for 18 years. And I'm a life member there now, and I've enjoyed it ever since. Look, I still have a soft spot for the Dogs, for obvious reasons. My dad still barracks for the Bulldogs, so let's call them my second team.
Yeah. Well, the Greek flag looks good amongst the blue and white out there at Canterbury, doesn't it?
It does. And although the Greeks have less influence out there now than they did in the past, it's sort of another
less than they do at the Roosters, by the sounds of things.
Oh no, Nick Politis is there, so that's all power.
He's a good Ipswich boy, old Politis. We know Queensland will claim him. It's a shame actually we can't get someone like that to get the next team up in Queensland, Western Corridor Magpies. Do we reckon Ipswich might be the prime location for the next NRL franchise?
They should honestly just move the Titans. I mean, there's just
they're terrible.
But it's just such a nothing team. I mean, appalling colours on the Gold Coast.
The colours aren't anything, are they?
Yeah.
There's sky blue, white, and yellow.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, there's some
shocking.
Who the hell designed that?
I don't know. Howard was there. He was the one that unveiled it. And there's a great photo I saw getting around the other day. It was just like, you could see the look of immediate regret on his face as he's handing out these jerseys. But they're owned and funded by the NRL now, and the Gold Coast is a transient town. You're not going to get many lifelong fans living there because people don't live in the Gold Coast for longer than 10 years.
Or players. And players love going there because you're right, it's transient.
Yeah.
And it's like, how cool is that? You live on the Gold Coast, you're going to live in Byron, and you can go to training. It's only 40 minutes away every day, and you can play at the stadium there, or Carrara, or wherever it is. And I reckon it's a fantastic lifestyle, but playing good footy is not about lifestyle. Playing footy is a business.
Yep.
I mean, these guys are in the business of playing football. Great sportsmen that I've ever seen, like take Mayweather, for example. He's not a boxer. He's in the business of boxing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brad Fittler is in the business of rugby league, and he always was. And if you're going to just be playing footy, then you might as well go, as you say, might as well go to the Gold Coast. But you want to be in the business of playing footy, you come and join the Roosters.
Or you do, you look at people who've done it. It's interesting you say that because I've always wondered if there are these strategic decisions. When JT went to Townsville, there was a club there that he could carry, and it was a 10-year game, and he played a long game. And I'm kind of seeing the same thing with Ponga at Newcastle. You know what I mean? With their streak that they've had, and then the talent that's building underneath, whatever's going on there. It's kind of a long game. That's the business of football. That's
how coaches think now.
Yeah.
And that's how the administration of these football clubs are good ones. That's how they think. And they're thinking about, I don't want to say dynasties, but they're building 10-year programs.
Yeah.
And if you're building any business, I don't give a damn. It should be a 5 to 10-year sort of period. You've got to have that with your view. Like every day is an important day, but you've got to have a long view on it. The old days, you just put a club together. And that's why Canterbury Bankstown was so powerful. Peter Moore, the Bullfrog, built dynasties.
Yeah.
And he built it not only through his own family in terms of how the club was controlled, but
he had enough kids to field his own team.
And cousins and uncles and aunties. Like his sister was the mother of the Hughes boys.
Yeah, right.
And then his own kids went and married the Andersons.
Yeah.
And he built these dynasties. It's the same sort of stuff you see in a Game of Thrones. Like you got this family marrying that family in order to bring the two groups together. Like it's pretty clever, and that's how it works.
Yeah, the family club, the Mortimers there. Yeah, all that. It is interesting. Do you have any examples of any sports stars that just weren't in the business of it? I guess if you look at someone like John Daly for that, he kind of had
He's a good example.
Yeah, he had all the talent and just wasn't in the business.
Well, I got more examples of people who were in the business. Greg Norman, for example.
Oh, yeah.
Like his success far outweighed his skill.
Yeah.
And also far outweighed his own record. Like the amount of money the guy's made, and the fame and the respect, probably more importantly, that he got as a golfer is far greater than his actual skill base.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was in the business every day. Was in the business of being a golfer, and he made sure he made all the right connections. Like he was close to Kerry. He made every connection that was important to run his game, his business. I mean, I look around some of the young guys now, and so, we have them in our own side, I guess, and great talent, but unrewarded talent's almost a proverb.
Yeah.
You went through school, you remember kids who were fantastic at either academically or sporting wise. They weren't the ones who probably are being most rewarded today. It's the guys that hung in there.
Yeah.
Or the girls that hung in there. And that's, to me, that's critical. And if you're running a football club, you've got to get that message through. Say someone like Trent Robinson does it, you've got to get that message through to your players. Sometimes it can't get through. And some of these guys are transient. Like Jimmy Maloney. He's a great person. He's in the business of rugby league. He doesn't give a shit. He's a journeyman. He goes from club to club. He runs out of, whatever. He decides, I'm going somewhere else. I'm going to get more money, but I'm going to play my last 6 months brilliantly. I'm going to make sure I get more money. I'm going to get recruited by somebody else. And he's extended his life. His life has been incredibly long in rugby league. Even now he's running the whole New South Wales State of Origin side. That guy is clearly in the business of rugby league.
Yeah.
Everyone needs a mentor, don't they?
And I think that's right. That's where mentoring comes in. And I mean, I don't know how he rates on your show, but Alan Jones...
We'd love an interview, Alan, if you're listening. We'd love an interview.
Whether you agree with him, we don't agree with him. A lot of stuff he says I don't agree with. A lot of stuff he says I do agree with. But one thing he's been great at is grabbing sports people and being a great mentor towards them. Yeah. And then getting him in, sending him in the right direction. Some of them hadn't actually made the right, some of them gone a little bit astray. One of which is sort of quite vocal recently. But nonetheless, he does mentor these people, and you're right, these sports people need good mentoring. And probably this, my whole objective in my business life now is actually to go to small business owners who think they're news agents instead of being in the business of being news agents. Yep. And that's my whole game plan. I want to show these people how to be in the business of, as opposed to just doing what they're doing every day.
Is that mentor.com.au?
Yep. It's something that I just believe in. I want to pay forward what I've learnt. And I've had some of the best mentors there are. And I didn't know it at the time. But what they taught me is one thing they always taught me is that they're in the business of, even politicians. Like, for me, great prime ministers usually come out of being a good treasurer at some stage, and or premiers, like Gladys, for example. She's a good example. The ones who are even the best prime ministers are the ones who are in the business of being a politician. Paul Keating, Bob Hawke, John Howard.
You reckon ScoMo's got both of that?
I think ScoMo's got there. Yeah, he didn't have it when I first interviewed him on my podcast when he was the treasurer. But my last podcast when he was the prime minister, which is just before the election, I noticed a totally different person.
You reckon he's topped up his cordial since then?
He totally has, and he's sort of got it. And I don't see. Shorten was never in the business of being a politician. Shorten was a trade union guy who's now a politician, and he wasn't going to get there. That's my assessment. And people read this. The electorate somehow they read this stuff, and you've got to be in the business of.
There's a sixth sense. You're right in the electorate.
How about Albo? Did you think
Albo's the same? I don't think. Right now, I don't think Albo's displaying. I'm in the business of being a politician, and I'm in the business of winning this, and I'm in the business of making sure the Labor Party proceeds to knock these guys off.
Yeah. I'm holding on with both hands.
That's what it looks like to me. And I don't see anyone in the opposition in the state Labor either who's in that position. Gladys is in the business of running the state.
Yeah.
Nick Greiner was in the business of running New South Wales, other than he had a bit of running with the ICAC. But I mean, he was still in that business.
Everyone does at some stage.
If you're good at business, you're running with ICAC. Bob Catter's in the business of politics.
Totally.
Yeah.
Richo, great example. Like the guy, you can't kill Richo. Like Richo has had every organ basically extracted from his body. And I had lunch with him, and I'm an old mate of his, and I had lunch with him about 3 weeks before the election, 2 weeks before the election. He turned up in a wheelchair. He's got a bloke pushing him around. He can't drink anymore, which is a bit of a shame because I used to love him when he was on the drink. But he ate everything on the table. He went right through the whole menu, and we had a great conversation. But he was right there and then was predicting what would happen if Shorten didn't win the election. Right at the levels of who's going to be the shadow treasurer, et cetera, et cetera. These guys are so far ahead of everybody else, it's ridiculous.
Are you willing to say any kind of businesses or businessmen or women that you are mentoring now? Any kind of proud kind of products of the wizard's wisdom?
Probably not. No one individual.
Yeah.
I've taken the view that I can't do that. I don't have the time to. The reason I set up mentor.com.au was because I can't go and do individual mentoring.
Yeah.
Because who do I choose? And how do I do it?
Yeah.
I mean, I get approached a lot. And I used to do a little bit of it like some years ago, but it was sort of random. It wasn't done properly. So I thought, okay, that's why I'm going to set up Mentored.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The whole objective behind Mentored is if you want to mentor, I can't do it, but I can sort of try and spread my knowledge, what I know, amongst thousands. Just by them coming online and having a look at what it is we offer. And we're about to launch our new website in 2 weeks' time, which is going to have tools and a whole lot of stuff on there.
Well, just quickly before we go, Mark, it's a very contentious issue here in Batuta. And
I feel like I've been getting set up the whole conversation, by the way. You're about to go clock.
We're going to ask that question you don't want to hear. No.
A very contentious issue here in town is the issue of home ownership and which generation had it easier. In your opinion, are houses easier to buy now, or were they easier to buy, 20, 30, 40 years ago?
They were easier to buy 20, 30 years ago, ridiculously easier.
Yeah.
They were easier to buy 2 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But for anybody who's trying to buy a home today, I feel sorry for them because it is unfair that home ownership will not be as accessible to the average Australian compared to what it used to be, and that's all been brought about by the bad behaviour of some banks, and it's all been brought about by politicians playing games and introducing the Royal Commission, which, by the way, we never needed to have.
Yeah. And
as a result of that happening, banks now have out new codes of conduct. They're now trying to prove they're not the baddies. It's not as if, by the way, we went through it, we had a subprime crisis here, or all our housing mortgages that started to fall apart.
Yeah.
We still are the best performing nation in the world by far when it comes to housing and in terms of paying back mortgages. We have never had a blip in our whole system, yet it was decided to hold a Royal Commission, and that Royal Commission now, the people are going to pay for it, and people are going to buy a house from today on.
Just quickly, when you were ripping and tearing with your home loans, where were they mostly being sold? Were they suburbs, or this idea of inner city living as well has completely changed the market landscape? You know what I mean? Once upon a time, living in Brisbane's West End or in Redfern, no one would even dream of doing that. But now that seems to be the goal for a lot of professionals anyway. Where were you selling them? Was it the display homes, or was it the leafy suburbs?
No, it was more established housing.
Yep.
And I'm not talking about the wealthy houses in Vaucluse because they try to borrow too much and we couldn't sort of lend to those people. Our average loan was $500,000. Mm-hmm. Still is at Yellow Brick Road. Our average home loan's about $550,000. Our average borrower is aged between 30 and 49. Mm-hmm. Our average borrower's income is $120,000. And we are lending mostly on houses as opposed to apartments. And we're not a market maker, we're a market taker, so we take the market. So to answer your question, our lending responds to where the market comes from. So the market is coming from inner city, like Ipswich, or not like Surrey Hills and Redfern and those sorts of environments in Sydney, and similarly in other states. All we can do is follow where the market comes from. Mm-hmm. I actually think that it tends to be the people who the first home buyers tend to be buying further out, and they're the harder to get set.
Yep.
they're harder for us to approve those loans because generally speaking, they need more deposit or something's going wrong with the place. So we tend to lend to the established housing market.
And let's just fingers crossed no more of those towers crumble.
Oh my God! I mean, well, that's interesting. That's a big issue. It's got nothing to do with my business, but excuse me, I find that to be abominable that something like that would happen.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone's going to blame everybody else, certifiers and all sort of stuff, but I just find it abominable that given engineering standards today, that you can have something that's going to sink into the ground.
Did you flag it when you saw all these towers going up overnight? It was happening in Brisbane, it was happening in Melbourne.
I didn't flag that something was going to sink, but I was concerned that everything was going up too fast.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know if they're cutting corners, but maybe engineers got too busy. I don't know, because it's not as if you can sort of say, I'm a builder, I'm not going to talk to an engineer, I'm just going to build the building. I mean, there is a whole process you've got to go through, and engineers are engineers. I mean, everybody uses the same engineers. It's not as if you can go and use some little guy around the corner who's got no experience in this stuff. But could you imagine if you bought one of those apartments, you got a mortgage, you bought one of those apartments, 700,000-800,000 minimum, you probably borrow $500,000, and now you can't sell it, you can't live in it, you can't rent it,
and it's worthless.
That's worthless.
Spewing.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, thanks for coming on today. Have you got the white Mercedes-Benz yet?
No, I drive a blue Toyota Hilux.
Beautiful. Dual cab?
Dual cab.
Oh, yeah.
And it's called Rogue.
Rogue.
That's not the number plate, but it's called the Rogue series.
Yeah.
I like the four-wheel drive. There's no white Mercedes. That's for gangsters, mate. And I'm at it, but
Cocaine white.
I'm at it a bit too. I mean, I had to drive the four-wheel drive out.
Yeah.
Got to look the part.
Yeah.
You do.
You do, and you fit well. You fit in well. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Yeah, I mean, actually, I'm a little bit disappointed because I thought you were going to take me down some sort of trail somewhere and tie me up, hog tie me, and just leave me there.
I'm sure you got a bit nervous when we start talking about Sharma and robocalls.
I got very nervous. Thanks, guys. I really loved it.
Thanks
for
much.
joining us.